Tomorrow evening at 6 you can see a candid and affectionate portrait of the Queen Mother as remembered by friends and associates. But now we catch up with today's events in an ITV News Special with John Suchet and Mary Nightingale. This replaces our advertised programme.
Royal family gather to remember the Queen Mother.
Her coffin is moved to All Saints Chapel in Windsor.
Flowers and tributes in Britain and beyond.
And Israel says it's war after another suicide bombing.
The ITV News with John Suchet and Mary Nightingale.
Good evening, welcome to this ITV News special programme.
Hello. The royal family came together at a special service for the Queen Mother this evening at one of the royal chapels in Windsor, where her coffin had been brought a little earlier. It had been carried to the Chapel of All Saints by 6 pallbearers over the short distance from the Royal Lodge where the Queen Mother died yesterday afternoon.
This evening's service took place after all the family had gathered at Windsor. Earlier, Prince Charles flew back to Britain with Prince William and Prince Harry, breaking with normal practice and travelling together on the same flight after the Queen gave permission. Our royal correspondent Tom Bradby has been following the day's events.
The royal family gathered at the Chapel of All Saints in Windsor tonight for a brief private service. The Queen and Prince Philip led the way. Behind them, Prince Charles, his brothers and sister, and some of the Queen Mother's great-grandchildren. At the rear of the party, Princess Margaret's children, who only 7 weeks ago lost their own mother. Earlier, the Queen Mother's coffin had been moved a few hundred yards from the Royal Lodge where she died to the chapel. The coffin was covered in the Queen Mother's royal standard and a small wreath of freshly picked pink camellias. It will remain here until it's moved to London on Tuesday. Prince Charles arrived back with his sons from their skiing holiday in Switzerland around lunchtime. He doesn't usually travel on the same plane as his eldest son and asked for the Queen's permission to do so. The 3 princes looked relaxed and happy as they began their holiday on Friday, and the contrast with the images today was striking. Prince Charles in particular is said to be deeply upset. The party went to Windsor for the service, but have tonight returned to their family home at Highgrove. Earlier today, people queued outside St James's Palace to sign the Book of Condolence.
My husband and I used to work for the Queen Mother, and that's where we met and where we were married, and so it means a great deal to us.
She just personified everything good about the monarchy.
I think she held the House of Windsor together, and it's going to be a real great loss.
I'm tinged with sadness, but also celebrating her life. Because 101, she's been a wonderful, wonderful woman.
At Sandringham too, the Queen's Norfolk estate, local people came to pay their respects.
She was a wonderful lady. There was nobody, when they made her, the mould was broken. And even now I feel like crying. She was such a wonderful person.
Outside Clarence House tonight, a bed of flowers and a small group of well-wishers. The public reaction has been measured rather than overwhelming, but the Queen Mother led a very full life and had long been frail. Her death is a time of grief for her family, but many of those who came to pay their respects today were doing so in celebration and thanks as much as sorrow. Tom Bradby, ITV News.
Well, Nicholas Owen is at Windsor now. Nick, obviously a very sad occasion, but very much a family gathering at Windsor this evening.
It was indeed. The Queen and 15 members of the royal family in that chapel of All Saints, a chapel very close to Royal Lodge. Bear in mind that the Duchess of York, as the Queen Mother was then, and her husband, who was then Duke of York, moved into Royal Lodge in 1931, 71 years ago. And their service, we're told, was a short and simple one, lasting about 30 minutes, and all sorts of little touches there. The camellias that Tom Bradby was mentioning, they were picked this morning in the garden of Royal Lodge, a garden the Queen Mother herself was extremely attached to. It is said that when guests arrived at Royal Lodge, certainly in the early days, they were all encouraged to get out there in the garden and do a bit of work in it. So quite extraordinary in all sorts of ways. It wasn't just members of the royal family there, I have to say. There was also Sir Alistair Aird, the Queen Mother's faithful private secretary. In my years as royal correspondent, he was a man I got to know well, and like so many of her staff, he served her for so many years. So tonight, the Queen Mother's coffin is there at at the Chapel of All Saints, out in Windsor Great Park, draped in her royal standard, but resting on a simple oak trestle.
Nick, what about the public response? There didn't seem to be many people around yesterday, but crowds do seem to have been gathering today.
Yes, there was quite a crowd here at Windsor at various times, obviously very quiet this evening. Some echoes, I think, actually, of the death of Princess Diana. That happened at a holiday weekend too, and of course people were much freer than usual to come out, and a lot of people did come here to Windsor. They seemed to need a focus to think about the Queen Mother and the rest of the royal family. But I have to say I didn't hear any words of cynicism at all, everyone with their own recollections.
Nick, what do we know about the royal family's movements over the next few days?
Well, we know that Prince Charles and his sons have gone back to Highgrove, the Prince of Wales wanting a little bit of time and space, I think, for his own recollections and thoughts about his grandmother. And as for the Queen, it's expected that she will be staying here at Windsor, at least for a few days. I think it is possible she will go to Westminster Hall, where the Queen Mother will be lying in state, the Queen to, if you like, lead, to be the first to pay tribute to her mother there. That's a possibility later in the week.
Nicholas Hearn at Windsor, thank you.
The Queen Mother's funeral will be held a week on Tuesday. Before that, the coffin will be moved to London, and there'll be a formal procession this Friday when it'll be borne on a gun carriage from St James's Palace to Westminster Hall for that lying in state. The male members of the royal family will walk behind it, and in a break with tradition, they're likely to be joined by Princess Anne. John Ray has more details.
Westminster Abbey tonight, the setting for so many royal occasions. It's here the funeral of the Queen Mother will take place after more than a week of official mourning. This Tuesday, her coffin will be moved from Windsor to the Queen's Chapel at St James's Palace. On Wednesday, Parliament will be recalled and MPs and peers will have the chance to pay tributes. On Friday, her coffin will be taken in a ceremonial procession to Westminster Hall, where she'll lie in state until Monday. On the morning of Tuesday, April the 9th, the Queen Mother's funeral service will be held at Westminster Abbey, and later that day, her body will be taken to St George's Chapel at Windsor and interred at a private service. Her closest friends will pay their last respects this week at the Queen's Chapel, close to the Queen Mother's London home at Clarence House. And then, here at Westminster, with Parliament recalled for a special session, it'll be the turn of politicians to offer their recollections of a woman who genuinely transcended party divisions and who's already drawn tributes from all corners of the country.
My own experience was at the Queen's Golden Wedding lunch, where I sat next to the Queen Mother, and she talked to me about the Cunard ships, the merchant fleet in which I sailed. She liked them as much as the Royal Navy ships, and we talked about a number of incidents, and she roared with laughter on a number of occasions.
Her many admirers among the public will recall their own memories when she lies in state within the medieval splendour of Westminster Hall. Thousands will file past her coffin. It's 50 years since the same scenes were played out. After the death of her husband, George VI, around his coffin a constant vigil was kept. His funeral was a full state occasion, an honour usually reserved for reigning sovereigns. Hers will be a ceremonial royal funeral with the same pomp, spectacle and solemnity. The service itself will reflect the Queen Mother's life and her faith.
Well, it will sum up, first of all, her traditional nature. It will be the Book of Common Prayer service, as in England, her United Kingdom side with hymns from Wales and Scotland, which have been important in her life, and of course the prayers which will recognise her enormous contribution to the life of this nation.
In contrast to the funeral and so much of the preceding week's events, her return to Windsor will be a private affair. Her body placed alongside that of her husband in the chapel dedicated to his memory. John Ray, ITV News.
And the royal biographer Robert Lacey is here now. And Robert, before that private funeral, the extraordinary procession on Friday, which will be on a scale that this country has rarely seen.
No, it will indeed hark back to the funeral of George VI, Churchill, that sort of state occasion. Really historic. I mean, I think it'll be the sort of thing that people will want to experience for themselves. It is literally a once-in-a-lifetime experience.
Do you think, given the changing role of the royal family now, that we will be witnessing a spectacle that we're not likely to see in our lifetime again?
Well, there'll obviously be wonderfully traditional aspects to it. I mean, the Queen Mother knew what she liked, and I'm sure the hymns we'll hear will be those good old rousing favourites that she always loved to sing herself in a beautiful voice in church. But let's not forget that pageant of hers that on Horse Guards Parade, and the wonderful touches of modernity and English eccentricity, and let's not forget the common touch she had, and the love for artistic things. We're going to be hearing about this, I'm sure, in the next week. But I think we'll probably be due for a few surprises.
We know that she specifically asked for no memorial service after all this is over, unlike, say, Princess Margaret. Why do you think she did that?
Well, she was always a very practical woman. I think she wanted things tidied away in that sense. She may even, if this was a recent decision, have been thinking about the Jubilee and not wanting to go on for too long. I think above all, though, she had this great theatrical sense, a sense of presence. And I'm sure she wanted her final funeral to be its own memorial service and the celebration of her life.
What of the Golden Jubilee this summer? We know that she was determined to see it. She won't be there. Do you think that'll give a different atmosphere to the whole occasion?
I think it will probably, despite the sadness at the moment, give a more positive atmosphere. I mean, I'm struck by how people are feeling sorry for the Queen at the moment, you know, the loss of both sister and mother. And I think people will want to give her a good time in the Jubilee and show that all the doubting that's been is unjustified, because after all, the Jubilee is about her and celebrating her, and people, I think, will rally to that.
Nevertheless, the royal family has lost a mentor.
They've lost a mentor, but I think in some ways we're going to see, for example, who's going to take the Queen Mother's place as a great advisor to the Queen? Well, look how quickly Prince Charles came back. I'm sure this afternoon they were discussing how to handle things, and I think we'll see more of a partnership between monarch and heir.
Robert Lacey, thank you.
A steady stream of people left flowers and remembrances at Windsor Castle today.
Yes, many of them had different reasons for being there, but they all said they wanted to do something to show how they felt. Andrea Catherwood spoke to some of them.
Tonight, families are still bringing flowers to the gates at Windsor Castle. Everyone, it seems, here has their own special reason to remember the Queen Mother.
Little Jordan here was born on the 4th of August, the Queen Mother's 100th birthday, and Jordan also left some flowers here today. She'd like to pay our respects.
The Queen Mother had close ties with Windsor throughout her adult life. She spent her last weeks here, and today the castle was thronged with people bringing their personal tributes.
Can you tell me what you've written? I've written, "At peace now with your beloved Bertie and Margaret," and she was a very lovely lady.
Thank you. Very kind of you.
Among them, hundreds of children. Some are too young to remember this day, but others already had their own opinions of what the Queen Mother meant to them.
She's been really nice to our country and she's helped us a lot.
The Snook family had travelled this morning from Cardiff to say goodbye to their favourite royal.
She was lovely when she was alive, and now that she died, we're sad.
Terry Hutt was only 4 when he first met the Queen Mother during the Blitz. Last year, she wrote to him.
Recently, I came out of hospital and she sent me a letter telling me to get well, and sorry that I was going through what I went through. But that little letter was the longest letter I've ever had.
And tonight the lawn at Windsor Castle is a carpet of bouquets. Here, as elsewhere across the country, where people have been paying their personal tributes to the Queen Mother, this has been a sad and reflective Easter Sunday. Andrea Catherwood, ITV News, Windsor Castle.
Well, we're going now to our senior news correspondent, James Mates at Buckingham Palace. James, it's obviously quiet there now, but give us a sense of what's been going on at Buckingham Palace during the day.
Well, Mary, many thousands of people have been here today. I would estimate that any one time there were in excess of 500 people outside the gates of the palace and on the steps of the Victorian Memorial. To give you an idea, the police have become so worried about the crush of people trying to read that small notice announcing the death of the Queen Mother. They've now erected red velvet rope lines so that from now on people will have to queue to go and read that notice in small groups. I expect there will be many more people here in the days ahead. Remember, many Londoners are out of town this weekend, and when they come back on Tuesday will want to come and pay their respects. Many tourists here as well. I should think at least half the crowd were tourists. Some of them just curious, but many I spoke to wanted to express the affection and the respect in which this great lady was held in their countries. It's sometimes easy to forget just how popular she was in the Commonwealth, in America and Europe.
Now, nearby, James, of course, is Clarence House, the Queen Mother's home. We can see pictures of the flowers left outside Clarence House now. What sort of messages have people been wanting to convey?
Well, that pile of flowers there has been growing steadily through the day. Of course, it's not the great sea of flowers we saw after the Princess of Wales died, but you wouldn't expect it as neither the shock nor the tragedy there was on that occasion. They're simple bouquets, simple messages. Of the many I've read, three main themes. They wanted to express their condolences to the Queen and the rest of the royal family, their gratitude for the life of duty that she's given, and also that she should now have, at last, the chance to rest in peace.
James Mates at Buckingham Palace, thank you.
Prayers were said for the Queen Mother at many of the traditional Easter Sunday church services around the country. The Archbishop of Canterbury gave thanks for her long life and said she would be remembered for touching the lives of ordinary people. Further from home, British troops in Afghanistan also paid their own tribute, as Shuli Ghosh reports.
The Lord's my shepherd, I'll not want. He makes me down to lie.
At Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan, British troops held a special service in tribute to the Queen Mother.
We offer our prayers and our condolences for the royal family and all who knew and loved Elizabeth, the late Queen Mother.
Remembrance of her long life was repeated in scenes across the UK. At Canterbury Cathedral, the Archbishop of Canterbury led the congregation in a minute's silence. Dr. Carey recalled the strength of the Queen Mother's Christian faith.
As the nation mourns, we give thanks to God for a life not only of great longevity, but also of one lived to the full. Our thoughts and our prayers this morning are with the entire royal family, but especially with the Queen, who has lost first a sister and now a much-loved parent in a matter of weeks.
At York Minster, tribute was paid to the woman who was described as having a zest for life and a love of people. Afterwards, churchgoers recalled their own memories of the Queen Mother.
Well, I was privileged to do the flowers at Badminton House and stay with her for 12 different occasions through the years of the 60s, 70s and 80s. And she was always such fun. You know, she had a great sense of fun. We put dandelions in her bedroom, which she thought was great fun.
What I remember really above everything else, probably I would say, is her graciousness. That was always present. And her ability to make whoever she was speaking to feel, I think I can say this, you're the most important person in the world.
At St Paul's Cathedral in London, the state bell was rung in her memory. The bell, known as Great Paul, was last sounded after the death of Princess Margaret 7 weeks ago. Shuli Ghosh, ITV News.
The Queen Mother made many visits to other countries, particularly in the Commonwealth, during her long life. One of her first more than 75 years ago. Heads of state in Australia, New Zealand and Canada have all expressed their condolences and recalled how she won people's hearts a long way from home. Bill Neely reports.
In Australia and across the world, quiet queues formed and public tributes were paid by people and prime ministers.
It is a time of mourning, but it's also very particularly a time of thanksgiving for a quite remarkable life.
It's half a century since the Queen Mother touched down in Australia to become the first royal to fly around the world. She first visited in 1926 by ship, stopping in New Zealand, where today the flags were lowered and prayers said across the country.
This is the Queen's Jubilee year, and she's lost her sister and now her mother, so I guess all our thoughts go out to her at this time. The Queen Mother was a most remarkable woman.
A sentiment echoed from New Zealand to the streets of Canada.
She was a wonderful woman, and she had a long, marvellous life though, so I'm glad we had her as long as we did.
Canada saw a dozen visits from the Queen Mother, beginning with an extravagant welcome in 1939.
As the sun breaks through, it's as if nature, like the citizens of Ottawa, has been saving all her welcomes through long hours of waiting.
And it was in Canada that the Queen Mother is credited with inventing the walkabout.
A scene unique in modern history. Suddenly and unexpectedly, their Majesties break away from their attendants and cross the road to the ex-servicemen.
50 years later, she returned to Canada for her final trip, aged 89. Her visits and her character remembered there today.
She inspired not only Great Britain, but also its allies. The death of the Queen Mother marks the end of an era.
She was the last Empress of India, and tonight from across the old empire, the modern Commonwealth and beyond, tributes to her echo the words of President George Bush. She was, he said, a pillar of strength and an inspiration across the world. Bill Neely, ITV News.
Nearer home, Scotland was a very special place for the Queen Mother. She was born into a Scottish family, grew up there and bought a castle there after her husband died. Martin Geisler reports now on how she was remembered in Scotland today.
Tonight, along Scotland's most famous skyline, tributes to a woman who always had a special place in her heart for this part of the world. The only property the Queen Mother ever owned is here, the Castle of May on the extreme north coast. She bought it after the death of her husband, attracted by the solitude. But her early years were spent in Scotland too, in the splendour of Glamis Castle near Dundee. She grew up there and throughout her life maintained close ties with the community.
She's very much loved around here. Spent, of course, most of her childhood here. And just a lovely lady.
It's a great loss, but at the same time we're celebrating a very long and wonderful life.
Balmoral was another home she loved. The castle was closed to visitors today, but a book of condolence was open. At nearby Crathy Kirk, where the royal family have worshipped for decades, special prayers were said.
Although we knew that it was inevitable, and we knew that she was 101, we'll be 102 this year, we're still very saddened by her death. But at the same time, too, on Easter weekend and Easter Sunday, it's a great weekend of hope.
Another book of condolence was opened at Holyrood Palace, the Queen's official residence in Edinburgh. They came in their hundreds to sign, locals and tourists alike.
Fondness, I suppose, is the word that first comes to mind. Everything that she did was so right. She behaved and she conducted herself in such a lovely way.
The news of her death hit us so hard, so we felt this morning that this was the ideal place to come and pay our respects.
She lived life to the fullest, and she was an inspiration to our women.
Jack McConnell, Scotland's First Minister, was among those who came to pay respect. Like their Westminster colleagues, members of the Scottish Parliament have been recalled to a special sitting on Wednesday when they'll pay tribute to the Queen Mother, a woman whose love for Scotland was never lost on the people here. Martin Geisler, ITV News, Edinburgh.
Well, the Queen Mother met countless people on her official visits and public appearances, and some of them have been sharing their memories today.
Always cheerful, inspirational are the kind of things they say, and they remember a special knack of putting people at their ease. Here's Juliet Bremner.
For hundreds of admirers without an official invitation, the Queen Mother's birthday celebrations were a chance to personally meet their royal favourite. Helen Sutton was at the front of the queue.
Very happy atmosphere, just very joyous, and really the Queen Mother's sense of enjoyment herself. She was obviously so thrilled that so many people had turned out. It was almost as if she was surprised, even though she knew every year that this happened.
By the age of 15, Helen, seen here wearing a blue bow in her hair, was a veteran of these birthday greetings. She was taken annually by her grandma and mother. It became an unmissable date in the Sutton family calendar.
She'd always find something relevant to say to everybody, and even the children who, you know, some of them were very young and could have easily been bored, just looked completely delighted to see her.
Chelsea pensioners Michael McLean and Ron Smith were also regular faces amongst those birthday crowds. They told me that as soon as she spotted their uniforms, the Queen Mother made a special point of coming over and speaking to them.
In fact, last year, when she had to use her buggy, she came down and the driver was actually driving past us, and she told him to stop and back up so that she could speak to us.
She said, "I'm afraid you've been here, waiting here a long time for my arrival." And I said, "It's an honour waiting here for you, Mum." And she turned to her equerry and said, "Oh, isn't that kind?"
Where the Queen Mother went, Betty Saunders followed, with flowers. She became so well known, the two often stopped for a chat.
Every time you think, I'm the only one there, she made you feel that you were the only one that she knew, that she was talking to, and just seemed to put you in a special place.
Even when Tony Rum showed her round a rather raucous Smithfield meat market, he found the smile firmly intact.
I never saw a grumpy face. I never saw her look particularly sad. She always had a smile. She was always cheerful. Think of the inspiration this lady must have been to the hundreds of thousands of people in the East End that she used to visit after they'd been bombed out at night.
She left Smithfield with the cheers ringing in her ears. Another triumph for a woman who seemed capable of finding and bringing enjoyment wherever she ventured. Juliet Bremner, ITV News.
And we'll be hearing more tributes from famous friends of the Queen Mother later in the programme.
First, though, to the day's other main story, a serious escalation in the Middle East conflict. Israel's Prime Minister Ariel Sharon declared that his country was at war tonight and sent dozens more tanks into the West Bank. He also said the Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat was the enemy of Israel and the free world. It followed 2 more suicide bombings which killed 16 Israelis. From Jerusalem, Tim Hewitt reports.
A Palestinian suicide bomber struck another devastating blow today. The target was a busy restaurant in the port city of Haifa, and the toll was high. 16 Israelis dead, according to police, and more than 30 injured. It brought to 75 the number of people killed in such attacks this year. Shortly after a second suicide bombing caused more injuries, Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon vowed to fight terrorism with no compromise. In an address to the nation, Mr. Sharon said, "We will pull up these wild plants by the roots, smash their infrastructure." In the West Bank city of Ramallah, meanwhile, Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat was still surrounded by Israeli troops at his shattered headquarters. Mr. Arafat today welcomed a group of